How well do you know your gods? Some of you are really alarmed right now. It's just a title for a little quiz I would like you to take this morning, okay? A little game we're going to play together. I'm going to read a description, and you tell me what god this is referring to, okay? Here we go. This god is really into hand jewelry, and he wants things done at the snap of his fingers. Yes, it's Thanos, our friend from the Avengers universe. All right. Thousands flee Canada every winter to worship this god, and he has been linked to many pyramid schemes over the years. Do you know your Egyptian deities? This is Ra, the sun god. Okay? All right, here we go. He's the undisputed king of the gods, and if you disagree, he'll send some thunder and lightning your way. Yes, this is Zeus, the head of the Greek mythological pantheon of gods. Okay, here we go. This reads like a singles profile. This god was born and raised in Japan, enjoys long walks on the ocean floor, but he often reluctantly shares the screen with a giant ape co-star. Any of you know this? You watch these cheesy black and white movies on Sunday afternoon when you were a kid like me? Godzilla, yes. Okay, here we go. This god may have many muscles, but he's a lousy handyman. His hammer does more breaking than fixing. Again, if you're dialed into the Avengers universe, it's of course Thor. All right, last one. Here we go. Oh no, two more. This god is also into jewelry, obsessed with one item in particular, but he should really be more concerned with getting some eyewear. Yes, it's our friend Sauron with the burning eye. Yes, he just needs a good dual focal lens there. Okay, last one. Often confused with a sweet treat, this god is a fighter, not a lover. Back to Greek mythology. Yes, it is Mars, the god of war. Now, these are all kind of gods from mythology or comic books or movies or some kind of thing. And they make for great stories, but they don't have much to do with everyday life. And yet there are another set of gods that also find their ways into the movies all the time, that actually have a lot to do with everyday life, but that we, in many ways, we are completely unaware of their godlike nature in everyday life. I'm talking about the language that we are using as we started a couple weeks ago and that we're camping out in again today, artificial gods. That there are artificial gods around us all the time. They're gods in the sense that things that we look to in everyday life that don't appear, they don't have muscles, they don't come from other planets, they don't have superpowers, but in a sense, we expect godlike things from them. We look to them for things like security, identity, belonging, worth, value, satisfaction. They're gods in that they promise or we expect them to deliver godlike things in our lives. In that sense, what I said to you a couple of weeks ago, and I've said often to people, that worship is not a religious thing or only a thing that certain people do. Worship is a human thing. Whether you are religious or not, whether this is your first time in church or first time in a long time, whether you're exploring the whole idea of God, capital G, that all of us, in a sense, worship, that we give our love, our service, our energy, our devotion. We make sacrifices. We even use this word, sacrifice of time, of energy, sometimes of our health, of our mental health, sometimes of our relationships and time with loved ones, to serve the gods that will give us a sense of belonging, identity, security, control, stability, satisfaction. And that so worship is, your choice isn't whether or not you will worship, it's just what God you will worship. What thing do you expect to give you a godlike thing in return? And we said that they're artificial in the sense that they cannot actually deliver. And that we are actually surrounded by these things that we are tempted, in a sense, to treat like God, but they fail us when we expect them to do things for us that they were never meant to do. We actually began a few weeks ago with one of the ways that it's most easy to see the God of money, and that money in itself is not evil. It's just a tool. But we don't just use it, we trust it. And the one-line worship song that I said to you we all sing to money is, all I need is a bit more. All I need is a bit more. It's the one-line worship song. And here's how you know, I said to you, that it is an artificial God, right? That we expect it to give us control and identity and security and deep satisfaction, a sense of security for the future because we have enough in the bank account. You know how you know it's an artificial God? Because somebody around you or near you or in the news has the little bit more that you think you need, and they're still singing the song, all I need is a bit more. It is an artificial God. Money is a very useful tool, or someone said it's a good servant. It's a lousy master. It's not a God that can deliver. And we're taking actually several weeks to go, yeah, actually money's not the only one. Maybe it's probably the easiest one to see, but there are all kinds of ways in which other very good things can become God-like things in our lives, and yet we're in trouble because we're expecting them to do something for us they can never do. The common word for this is an idol. And an idol is not an evil thing. It's an ordinary thing. It's a good thing that becomes a problem when we make it a God thing. When we take something ordinary, useful, and even inherently good, and we expect it to do God-like things for us. And the one I want to talk about today is idols that you're most likely to find in church. Idols that you're most likely to find in church. And here's the idols that you're most likely to find in church. Being right and doing right. Being right and doing right are the idols you are most likely to find in church. Now think about this for a moment. Being right, this idea of knowing what's true, knowing what's good, being on the side of truth, or we use words like conviction and belief, and zeal, like being right, knowing that I know what's right about the world, that I'm on the side of truth, that I'm with those who are right, that I'm in this camp or this community, that religion especially tends to breed or create communities around being right. And that this is what it means, in a sense, not only being right, but also doing right. That religion, religious communities, Christianity, churches are places where this is also about that I do the right things. Not just that I know the right things, not just that I believe the right things, but that I actually do the right things. And that in a sense, to come to church or to come to the synagogue or come to the mosque or come to the temple, that in a sense that people would have an assumption that I am a good person. In fact, sometimes even before I became a pastor, when I would say to someone, oh, I went to church yesterday, they would go, oh, you're so good. I'm like, I'm so good. Like, it's just an association. Oh, that's what that is, that you are a good person if you go to these things. Not just that you are right, but that you do what's right. Some people come into places of worship or churches and expect that, oh, if I'm here, it means I'm already a good person. This is part of a life that I am an upstanding, I'm a good person. In fact, people kind of define, we expect communities of faith or churches or whatever to be that way. That this is the place where I will learn what to believe. In other words, to be right, to know what's right. And this is a community where I will learn how to behave, to do what's right. That's kind of the assumption of what these communities are about, where we learn what to believe and we learn how to behave, and that's what actually makes this community a community. In fact, some people will send their kids to Christian school because they're like, well, this is where I want them to learn what the right things are to believe so they can be right in their belief. And this is where they're going to learn to behave properly so they can learn what the right way is to behave. Or I want to put them in Christian school because I don't want them in the other schools where maybe they'll be taught the wrong things. They won't believe what's right, or they'll be surrounded by people who don't believe what's right, or they'll be surrounded by people who don't behave in a right way. And so I want to protect them from bad behavior. That this is, in a sense, a way that this is how communities like this, of faith, of religion, especially even churches, that we conceive of. That these are places about being right and doing right. Now, let me pause for a moment. Is it wrong to want to know what's true? to want to know what's real, to want to know what you can believe in. In fact, many of you growing up in the digital age where we are just aware of how much fake news there is out there and how much kind of misguidedness or misconceptions or lies are even out there, or people trying to convince other people about that. And so there can be this desire to go, wait, can somebody tell me what's real? Can somebody tell me what's true? Can somebody tell me what's right so I know I'm believing what's right? That is a good thing. I think that there's nothing wrong with him. Maybe some of you are coming to church even today or for the first time or after a while because you're like, I wasn't thinking clearly about the world. I feel like I'm thinking more clearly now. This is helping me, or this is what I'm looking for. Is it wrong to look for that in a church? No, that's a good thing and a good desire. Likewise, is it wrong to want to do what's right? No, I think there is something baked in us as human beings that we actually want to do what's good. We want to make good decisions. There's something in us that we actually feel good about when we've done something good, when we've chosen what's good and what's best. Perhaps some of you are like, I'm here because I was not doing what was right. Like my life was a mess from some of the ways and decisions that I was making. And now as I've found God or I've found this community, I'm finally living in a way that I feel that I'm glad for. None of that is wrong. But can I just say this? When we make doing right and being right, not just goals that we are pursuing, but gods that we trust in to save us, we're in trouble. And let me just explain this, because I think this is not an easy concept to understand, but it is everywhere. And when we see it, we can't unsee it, which is the goal, really, of this kind of a series. What do the gods of doing right and being right offer us? They offer us things like identity, like to know I'm a good person. I want to know I'm good. I want others to see me that way. They can offer that subtly promised identity that you'll be known as a good person. Self-confidence. And I want the confidence to know I'm right. That gives me a sense of stability of confidence. Sometimes it gives a sense of power and control to be able to, if I'm right, I have the right to tell others what's right. That's definitely true for people like pastors and priests and religious leaders, or people who have authority or are seen as people who know what's right and do what's right in communities, that they have the authority to tell us. Sometimes we want that. They offer us a sense of power and control. They offer us a sense of belonging. I'm with the right group, right? This sense of being right and doing right lives and thrives in communities where we are on the side of truth and we know that's right, and it's us against the world. That gives us actually, this is what tribalism is about in general, kind of social dynamics, right? It gives us a sense of belonging. And religious communities definitely offer that in a way of knowing what's right and doing what's right. And then even in a sense of security, that like I'm on solid ground. Like I know I'm on, because I know what's right, and I'm confident in that, and I'm living rightly, so that gives me a sense of security. Identity, self-confidence, power, control, belonging, security. These are all godlike things, and in a sense, it's not even wrong to want that, but when we trust being right and doing right to give us those things, we are making them into gods that will inevitably fail us. And they fail us in two ways. Two ways that can end up being very destructive for us and for the people around us. But I don't want you to take my word for it. I actually want to look at two figures, religious figures in the first century Jesus movement who grappled with this and who, in a sense, realized that they were trusting in and, in a sense, worshiping, serving, giving time, energy, and mind share to these gods of being right and doing right, and how it actually failed them and failed the people around them. The first person is called Paul, and some of you may know him as the Apostle Paul, or in some traditions, Saint Paul. Just a bit of context before I read a portion from a letter that he wrote explaining his downfall because he trusted in these gods. He was a Jewish person, but not just a Jewish person. He was part of a group called the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were people whose lives were built on being right and doing right. They were people who, in a sense, knew and were able to interpret for the Jewish community all of the 613 or something like that laws that they had. They had the 10 Commandments, they had the rest of the law in Deuteronomy, and then they had this rabbinic tradition, or the tradition of the rabbis, that told them how this is all the way you're supposed to live. And Pharisees were people that not only knew all of those laws and knew all the interpretation, in a sense, religious lawyers. This is what, in this situation you do this, oh, that person, oh, there's a debate, well, here's how you settle that debate. They weren't just people who knew what was right. They were people who, in a sense, who did what was right. They were people who actually followed all this 600 and something laws. And Paul was one of those people. And he was around. He was born just a few years after Jesus, actually. And so he was around in Jerusalem during the time and life of Jesus and his death and resurrection, and then the Jesus movement that was exploding all over Jerusalem and then beyond kind of Palestine. And he was very concerned about this movement because he was like, this guy Jesus, he's an imposter, or he's like, he's a charlatan. He's tricked all these people into thinking that he's God, and they're following him, not just as Messiah, but they're saying things like, he's Lord, he's Savior. This is blasphemous. This is so wrong. He's like, I know as a Pharisee, I know what's right and I do what's right. We have to shut this thing down. And so he kind of started a crusade against the Jesus movement. And look what he says as he's writing to a group of Jesus followers in this letter. He says, you know, this is Galatians 1, you know what I was like when I followed the Jewish religion, how I violently persecuted God's church. I did my best to destroy it. I was far ahead of my fellow Jews in my zeal for the traditions of my ancestors. Now just look at that verse there for a moment. Look at all of the doing right and being right language in there. Zeal, religion, followed, traditions, ancestors. Saying, we knew, I knew that the tradition, what was right, I had the rules of my religion, and I followed them, and I was ahead of everyone else. I was the most devout. I was committed to the traditions of my ancestors. This is what we've always known is right. This is what's still right. This is what we've always done. This is what we will continue to do. And I have a passionate commitment. That's what zeal is. This passion, this I'm on fire for God. He said, you know that's what I was doing. And by the people listening to this letter would have known people who were running away from this person, Paul, who was trying to shut them down or throw them in prison or close down churches and imprison and maybe even kill pastors in the Jesus movement. They know, he's like, you know how passionate I was because I knew what was right and I did what was right. And he says the result was, I violently persecuted God's church. This is the first thing the first way we see that these gods of doing right and being right will fail you. What they ended up producing in this person who was so sure he was right, so sure he was actually on the side of truth, and he had the backing of his whole religious community and the tradition of his ancestors, and I know I'm right and I know I'm doing right, and I'm passionate. I know I'm doing what God wants me to do. And he says, actually, I was violently persecuting God's church. This was a movement of God that I became villain public enemy number one of, believing that I was on the side of God and I was on the side of truth. Because when he had devoted himself and made being right and doing right ultimately the God that told him what to do, it produced in him arrogance and judgment. Arrogance and judgment. I was so sure I was way ahead. I was the best of the best and I knew what I was doing. And that arrogance and judgment proved to be incredibly destructive. It actually pushed him away from God, right? He has this realization, I was on the wrong side. I was sure I was on God's side, but clearly I was working against God. And it actually destroyed others. So it destroyed his relationship with God and destroyed his relationship with others. But look at what happened when the true God, not being right and doing right, the true God actually came in to save him. He continues on. But even before I was born, verse 15, God chose me and called me by his marvelous grace. Then it pleased him to reveal his Son to me so that I would proclaim the good news about Jesus to the Gentiles, to the non-Jews. Verse 15, he says, God intervened. He showed me his marvelous grace. Even though I was so wrong and I was so sure I was so right, even though I was my rightness, because I was convinced I was right, I justified wrong things like violent persecution as doing right because I was sure I was right. And God intervened with his grace. In other words, he didn't strike me down and killed me. He knocked me off my feet in a vision and said, dude, you are on the wrong side. You are so wrong. He says, in his grace, and then look, he says, he helped me know his son Jesus and tell others about Jesus. Verse 16, he showed me who his son was, that it's Jesus is actually the Son of God. I was so wrong about Jesus. And now he called me to tell others about Jesus. Look at this. What is he saying? Knowing the right things was replaced with knowing Jesus. And doing the right things was replaced with living a life for and about Jesus. This was the great move of salvation. When he was bowing down to serving the gods of knowing, doing right and being right, it actually produced arrogance and judgment in him, which destroyed his relationship with God and destroyed people. And when God saved him by his grace, he moved Jesus to center stage in Paul's life. And Paul was like, now what I know is Jesus. And now what I do is for Jesus and with Jesus and about Jesus. This was how God saved him, truly, from the God of being right and doing right. And then Paul, this is what's so cool. Paul had to go and save another religious leader from an equal and opposite destructive result of making doing right and being right his God. And he goes on to say it in the passage. I'm not going to get into it because there's a lot of verses, but let me just shorthand it for you. Paul had to go and deal with another religious person, another religious figure named Peter. Peter was actually one of Jesus' closest friends and followers, and he was one of the most influential leaders in the early church. And when the Jesus movement starts to go all over the place, it goes well outside of Jerusalem, well into what they call Gentile or non-Jewish territory. So now you got all these non-Jews coming to faith in all these house churches that are popping up all over Central Asia. So Peter, who would have been seen as very powerful and influential, he was one of Jesus' best friends, comes to visit these churches. People are like, oh, this is amazing. And it said when Peter was there, he began to eat with them and hang out with them. And that's no small thing because non-Jews ate they didn't eat kosher. They ate different foods. Some of them ate food that were sacrificed to idols in the workplace they were in because that was just how it worked. And these house churches, they went into church buildings. They were meeting in homes, which involved the meal and involved worship and all that stuff. And Peter's there and he's accepted. And they probably thought, this is amazing. So one of Jesus' closest followers is accepting us by eating with us and welcoming us into the family of God, the family of Jesus followers, this multi-ethnic now, multi-socioeconomic family. And then all of a sudden, Peter starts to hear that people are coming from Jerusalem to visit him because they're concerned that he's not eating kosher. He's abandoning Jewish law. He's not doing right or thinking right and acting right anymore. And so what happened was Peter leaves. He stops eating with them, which meant was he stopped going to the house churches with them. And worse than that, a whole bunch of other Jews who had looked at Peter and thought, okay, this is cool. We can welcome all these people. They're a part of the Jesus family. We don't need to follow Jewish food laws anymore. We don't need to follow all these other things. We can just follow Jesus now together. They all left with him. And so Peter, out of fear, leaves this community because he's worried that people are going to say, oh, you're not thinking right, you don't believe right, and you're not acting right. And so he leaves the table and actually leaves the church. And now what he's doing, he starts to split this new church. And so now all the Jews are saying, no, we don't welcome you. We can't eat with you. We can't be a part of what you're doing. And in fact, if you want to be with us, you have to become Jewish. You have to become kosher. You have to become circumcised. You have to do all this other stuff. And it was splitting the church apart. For Peter, it was not arrogance and judgment that these gods produced in him. It was insecurity and fear. Suddenly, he went from being sure, welcoming others, suddenly insecure. Oh no, I did what was wrong. Oh no, I got to fix this. Out of fear for what other people would say, he ended up pulling away from the community of Jesus that he was in. And it actually ended up pushing others away from him. He separated himself from them and said, no, we can't be together. It actually pushed others away from each other, right? Because he started to divide the church because of his insecurity and fear, because he was worried that people would say he wasn't being right and doing right. And it possibly started to push them away from God, because if they were like, wait, if Peter doesn't accept us who is right with Jesus, maybe Jesus doesn't accept us. This was destroying relationships. Friends, this is what these gods of being right and doing right were producing judgment and arrogance in Paul, that caused him to act violently and destroy his relationship with God, destroy other people. It produced insecurity and fear in Peter that made him pull away from community, separated him from others, separated others from each other, created all kinds of disunity, and possibly separated others from knowing God, Jesus, the one they had come to follow. Friends, wanting to know what's true and real and good is a good thing. And wanting to do what's good and true and best is a good thing. But when we trust, when we look to those things to give us our sense of identity, I'm a good person, that sense of belonging, I'm on the right side, I'm on the right team, and I have the backing of the community, and now I'm safe here. The sense of power and control, I have the right to tell others what to do. Or a sense of security, because I know I'm doing what's good and right. When we trust those gods to give us that, instead of Jesus at the center of our lives, it will produce things in us, either arrogance and judgment on one side, or insecurity and fear and shame on the other, all of which destroys relationship with each other and with God. What's the solution? As we live in communities that really want to pursue and understand what's good and best and true, and want to live our lives based on what's good and best and true, look what Paul says next, in the next chapter, Galatians. For when I tried to keep the law, there was all the particulars of Jewish law, and he's not talking about being immoral, he's talking about when I try all these things, do the right things, know the right things, do the right things, it condemned me. This is Paul's a clever writer. This is so ironic. He says, when I tried to do what was right, it damned me. That's what he means. It damned me. It actually proved me wrong. So I died to the law. I stopped trying to meet all its requirements so that I might live for God. My old self has been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. So I live in this earthly body still by trusting, not in being right and doing right, in trusting, what does he say? The Son of God. By trusting in the Son of God, Jesus, who loved me and gave himself for me. Friends, this is so powerful. He says, when I tried to do right and be right, it damned me. It didn't produce anything good in me. It produced arrogance and judgment, and out of that, I actually destroyed God and other people, and I was on the wrong side. Or if Peter was writing this, it's like, yeah, when I tried to live like that, it produced insecurity and fear, and I broke relationship with other people. I almost divided the church. You can read about this in the book of Acts and in Galatians. When I tried to do that, it damned me. So you know what? I died to it. I'm done trying to just be right and do right. And now I don't have to worry about it. I do whatever I want. That's not what he says. This isn't about, just you do you, live how you want to be. Don't let anybody tell you what to do. That's our solution often. And actually in a culture, for many of us who maybe grew up with a kind of religion, whether it was the Christian religion or some other religion that was maybe felt constraining and it was all about doing right and being right, and it produced very judgmental and arrogant people or very insecure and fearful people. Look, let's just be honest. There's so much damage that religion in general, and even the Christian religion, if we can be honest about history, that this kind of thing, these false gods of being right and doing right, has produced so much pain, so much chaos, so much disunity, so much division, so much destruction, even death. We have to be honest about that. And yet, when we're honest about it, the solution can be, therefore, no one has the right to tell anyone what to do, and we'll throw off all these rules, and you just live however you want to live. That's not what he says. He says, I died to the law to try to live up to it and be a good person, do it. He says, instead now, I live with Christ and for Christ. He says, Christ's death on the cross was like me dying to my old way of trying to be right and do right. Now, he says, Christ lives in me. So he says, verse 20, Christ lives in me. Now my heart, my desires, my thinking, my goal is not to do right and be right, but to follow Jesus, to stay with him. And maybe in that moment he was calling to mind one of Jesus' biographers quoted Jesus saying, that he said to his disciples, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. the desire to know what's good and best, and the desire to live out a life that's good and best is not found in you knowing the right things and doing the right things. It's found in following me because I am the one. I am the way. Follow me, I will lead you into what's good. I am truth. Truth isn't an idea, a bunch of things you know. It's a person that you know. Follow me. I am the way. I am the truth. And I will give you life. Jesus said it. I'm the way. I'm the truth. I'm the life. And Paul says, yeah, you know what? So I died. I'm done trying to live up to being right and doing right. And now I follow him. Jesus has taken front and center stage in my life. Friends, this is way harder, right? Being right and doing right is far easier than following and becoming like Jesus. Let's just be honest. It's easier to know, just tell me the right things and I'll believe them and I'll talk about them and I'll tell everyone else and I'll be able to know who's right and who's wrong. Tell me the right things to do and I'll just follow that. And if I fail, I'll try again and I'll just do that because that's my effort and I'm in the driver's seat when it's about knowing right and being right and doing right. But when I follow Jesus, he's in the driver's seat. I'm following his lead. I'm trying to stay with him. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to stay close to him. And it is hard to do. Just ask Paul. Just ask Peter. Peter was literally with him. And he slowly got pulled off track. This is what happens in religious communities, where we can move into judgmentalism and arrogance, or we can move into insecurity and fear. Staying with Jesus is the goal. All obedience, all rightness, all right thinking, all zeal and passion for God, if it doesn't lead us to Jesus over and over again, if it isn't about Jesus over and over again, if all the stuff that we're talking about truth isn't actually helping people see Jesus, it's just empty, dead religion, and it will fail you, and it will fail others. How do we keep Jesus at the center, the way, the truth, and the life? The only true God who saves us. Let me give you a couple questions just to think about as you reflect on this, as you do a bit of an audit in your own life. Because listen, these are the idols that are at church. So if you're at church, if this is home for you, if you're like, yeah, I'm in. Maybe if you're just checking it out, like this is helpful for you to understand. What are we actually talking about? This is not a religion. This is not about being right and doing right. Jesus came to end all religion. He says, I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. But what if you're someone who's saying, yeah, this is home for me? How do we find out whether we are drifting towards, a judgment and arrogance or towards insecurity and fear that either just doesn't produce anything good in us? So here's some questions, and I'm just going to go through them slowly. How do I know if doing right and being right is an idol in my life? How do I know that? If maybe that's now just a God that I'm trusting in. Here's some questions. If I can read and study and watch a lot of videos about God and faith and the Bible, but I pray very little to Jesus, right? Like if all my studying and thinking and watching about Jesus, about faith, about whatever, isn't actually leading me to him, if I don't talk to him very much in prayer, maybe I've made this other stuff a God. If my spouse or kids would say that being right is very important to me, if I'm someone who always has to be right, always has to have the last word, always has to know, maybe I've made that a little bit of an idol. If within my close friend group, people I spend time with, there is no one who isn't a follower of Jesus, that's not the way of Jesus. Jesus spent a lot of time with people who believed and behaved very differently from him, and they liked him, and he liked them. They wanted to be with him. If there's nobody in my group am I actually following the way of Jesus? Or I've just created a community that helps me reinforce what I think and how I behave. If I love religious debates and debate heroes online on Instagram, but I have no interest in learning from people shaped by Jesus' love. Can I just say the life of Mother Teresa doesn't make for a great Instagram reel, but it is a life shaped by the love of Jesus. And there's a lot of people who like to talk about it and debate about it, but they're not actually producing the love of Jesus. And if that's what I'm consuming in mass quantities, maybe I've made being right and doing right my God, and not Jesus himself. When others point out my shortcomings, am I defensive, argumentative, like arrogant, or do I fall apart in insecurity and fear. Either way might reveal that my trust was in being right. Therefore, I have to defend it and prove that I am right. Or no, I've been exposed, I'm wrong, I fall apart. And my faith falls apart with it. Am I more concerned about my kids' behavior than with their relationship with Jesus? Do I just want them to be right and do right? Or do I want them to know Jesus? To know who he is. As Paul said, the one who is now living in me. What's my goal for my kids? When I struggle with my addictions or shortcomings, do I hide from Jesus, like isolation, run away from others, escape addictions, or just streaming or whatever when I face my failures, or do I run to Jesus in prayer, to others in community? Some of us, when we disappear from church for a long period of time, it's because we're hiding because of our failures and shortcomings. We're insecure, we're afraid. We're running away from the one and the people we're meant to run to. If others' good decisions and their life and their rightness makes me feel ashamed of mine, I can't celebrate their goodness, it just makes me feel bad about my life. Or their bad decisions makes me judgmental towards them. Can't believe they did that. How could they do that? Maybe I've made being right and doing right an idol. If I shy away from, like I avoid, or I get really angry and engaged in complex or conflicting ideas about God and faith, again, on social media with my friends. If I run away from complexity and fear, or I move towards it with anger because I know I'm right, maybe being right and doing right have become a god for us. And then this one. If everything that I know and believe about Jesus and the way I follow him looks the same as it did 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years ago, I may be in trouble, right? That's true about Paul and Peter. They couldn't change. They couldn't realize God was doing something new. They were stuck in their old ways of thinking and believing in God. This is what we've always done. This is how we've always thought. This is what the traditions, Paul says, of my ancestors, and I knew them better than anyone else. I am right and I'm doing right. They couldn't see that he was actually fighting God, and God was doing something new in Jesus. If my faith, what I think and believe and the way I follow looks exactly the same 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago, friends, our lives are supposed to look more and more and more like Jesus. And as I always say, I'm not who I once was, but I'm not yet who I want to be. That should be our song. I am becoming. It's hard. It's easier to just be right and do right. It's harder to follow him. Friends, if any of those things on that list, you're like, yeah, maybe I'd say yes to that. I know there's some for me. We need God's grace. We need the same marvelous grace that Paul talked about, that intervenes in our life and doesn't let us go down the road of becoming more judgmental or more arrogant or more insecure and more afraid, but keeps us knowing, following, loving Jesus.